Good day. My name is Mike Harry, and I am here with the Six Sigma Academy in sponsorship with General Electric Corporation, and it's my pleasure to present to you the Six Sigma videotape series. With me is Mr. Greg Brew.
How you doing today?
Hi, Greg. We're very glad you could join us. Greg is a Six Sigma Academy associate and also a senior master black belt working with General Electric. Greg, kind of what we're here about on this videotape series is to better understand what Six Sigma is all about, why we need it, how we implement it, and how we use it to derive benefits for both the producer of products and services and various deliverables, as well as the all-important customer. I mean, after all, it's the customer that pays the bills, right? That's right. So the focus should always be on the customer. And Six Sigma is a level of quality for the customer that only allows 3.4 defects out of every million opportunities for defect. I mean, if only our wives could think that we were that good with quality around the home front, huh?
What's this opportunity thing anyway?
Well, Greg, in opportunities, we're going to be getting into that and describing what an opportunity for defect is, exactly what defects are, the tools and methods to achieve that level of quality. Well, one would necessarily ask, that's an awfully high standard of quality. Why would one want to achieve a quality level that high? Well, it's simple. We have found, by implementing Six Sigma within Motorola, Texas Instruments, ABB, Allied Signal, General Electric, a fundamental precept, and that's that the lowest cost producer is the highest quality producer.
And we'll be showing evidence of that today?
We'll be seeing lots of evidence of this throughout the videotape series. But as a logical starting point for us, Greg, I think maybe we should understand the resources that we have at hand for this series.
Sounds reasonable.
For example, what books, what other types of vehicles, instructional nature do we have?
And then this videotape.
And this particular videotape. How to use this videotape to better teach the deployers of Six Sigma, if you will, what we call black belts, how to use the videotape, how to use these resources in order to transfer the knowledge of Six Sigma tools and methods to the constituency of a corporation. To begin, in front of you, as the viewer of this videotape, you should have two fundamental books. Book one. This is the Vision of Six Sigma, a roadmap for breakthrough. It is an integral part of the breakthrough strategy, and we'll be using this book as we move forward with the videotape. The second book we'll also be using is the Vision of Six Sigma, and is the tools and methods for breakthrough. Now, when we say breakthrough, what we're really talking about, Greg, is a 12-step process. And those 12 steps are centered around the idea of measuring, analyzing, improving, and controlling critical to quality characteristics. That's what we mean CTQ. By the letters, yeah, exactly. CTQ, critical to quality.
What would be an example of that?
For example, if we were producing this pen, let's say, that I have in my hand, a critical to quality characteristic would be this, how well it fits, that it doesn't come off when we drop it.
So it seals and doesn't leak.
That's right.
Okay.
As the customer of this pen, it's critical to me that when I go to put this pen in my pocket, that the cap don't fall off thereby, I mean, we've all had ink spots, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's critical to quality of the pen. But I want to draw your attention back to the Breakthroughs cookbook here. Essentially, what we have in the first three steps is the idea of measurement in the four-phase breakthrough approach. The next three steps involves analyze, then improve, and then control. Those are the four fundamental phases of breakthrough: measure, analyze, improve,
And control.
and control. And we call that the MAIC process. And that's really what the videotapes is all about, and the books and the resources. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at various statistical tools, techniques, and procedures for actually realizing the intent of these 12 steps.
So what's the bottom line here, though? I mean, you've got this measurement thing. What is...
The bottom line is simple. As we look at the cost structure in an organization and what drives the customer to be satisfied, we find that they have certain critical to quality things. By focusing experts, if you will, in this 12-step breakthrough strategy, who can also wield and chop and kick the tools of statistics, we're able to realize the aims of the cookbook and improve the probability of successfully producing a CTQ with no defects.
So something that you can actually quantify, right?
It's something that we can quantify, exactly. Okay. So we start off by defining those things that we must improve, but we must first start by learning how to measure them, and then to analyze the data that comes from those measurements, and then how to identify key variables in the process that will improve the performance of that CTQ, and ultimately how to control those vital few variables, if you will, over time.
That makes sense.
And to help us with this, we're going to employ several key resources. From book 1, we have various chapters. Each chapter contains several key concepts, broken down, of course, in the form of these chapters. I will be presenting those up here on the screen, and what you will note on each chapter is a chapter number and a page number. Is it possible to zoom in on this for us here? There you can see very clearly that we have a chapter number and a page number for this. And I will make reference as we move through this series as to which book we're in. Book 1, which would be called the White Book, which is the roadmap, or Book 2, which is the Black Book, which contains the tools and methods for achieving the aims of the 12-step breakthrough strategy.
So I can use that along with this videotape to follow along, perhaps.
That's right.
Okay.
And let's cover some ways that the learning will occur. If we could focus on page 1.6 here, what we have is you and I will be having some discussion. We call that lecture. In turn, hopefully you will be making notes in your book as we move through the series. The course notes, and of course the course materials. Your instructor, who is presenting this material to you, may have additional handouts to support the key concepts and lessons presented in the various chapters. Of course, you will have specific application examples if you're in transactional areas, engineering areas, or manufacturing areas. We'll also present specific case studies, both on the videotape as well as what your instructor will present. And of course, there's no substitute of self-review. Yeah. All vital.
That's true.
To learning. And here again, because this is a 12-step breakthrough strategy, it's essentially a cookbook, a step-by-step approach for achieving the aims and goals of Six Sigma. And the video, where appropriate, you may choose to use segments of this video or all of this video. For example, Greg, how would you use this video if you were a new instructor, a new master black belt, tasked for the first time to go out and teach Six Sigma?
Well, I'd probably use it as a supplement to the case studies I present, and if something doesn't make sense, we go refer it back to the videotape, etc. So I would use it for a supplement, as well as an interactive approach to showing people how to use this thing and how to deploy the Six Sigma philosophy.
Would this help me technically if I were not, say, an expert statistical type, e.g. just short of a statistician?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Could I use this videotape series to perhaps, in the classroom, start the videotape on a specific chapter, let my audience see it, reference in the book, and then stop it at the end of that chapter and take on questions, provide exercises and case studies?
That's exactly how it would be worked. That makes a lot of sense.
Good.
I can even freeze frame it and look at a certain section perhaps and then move on forward to that or a specific example.
You know, that's an excellent point, is this idea of freeze framing. Because many of the slides that we present will be put up here very briefly. So as the user of this videotape, you'll be able to hit the pause and get the detail off of any particular slide. So you'll find me throughout this series putting a slide up and highlighting it, and then you can pick the detail out later, Greg.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because a lot of the white book is a lot of graphics involved with it, so this explanation will help us quite a bit.
Good.
So,
well, the next step that we go to in our learning model here and how to better use this videotape series is hands-on computation. Of course, there is no substitute for this. It helps us better understand the essence of things. We'll also be showing computer simulations. This particular one, I'm going to double underscore, because when we see the tools and methods being dynamically used to illustrate the concept, there's no substitute for animation.
Playing around with the numbers and, well, what if I go to this extreme or that extreme, that kind of thing.
That's exactly right.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's exactly right. And of course, during the delivery of this by your instructor, you will have application projects and participant-specific presentations during your reviews of applications when you go out into the factory or back to the office to present these things.
Yeah, the application part is extremely important because that's you applying the tools that you learn. So
that's exactly right. But there's no substitute in terms of skill development. Simply stated, you must want to do it. You've got to learn the tools. You've got to be willing to practice. You've got to be allowed by your management.
Very critical, yes.
Very critical. Practice is what it's all about. And you've got to have adequate resources to support you during the course of that practice. And finally, and one of the key lessons learned,
that is a key lesson,
is you've got to have adequate coaching while applying this on the job.
Yeah, because you could misapply it perhaps. I mean, you want to clear that up right away.
That's exactly right. It always helps somebody to be looking over our shoulder when we're making those first few efforts at riding a bicycle for the first time.
Or just trying to plug something in the computer. You have to have some basic understanding of, hey, it's just not a...
That's right.
It's not going to spit out a number and be done with it, you know.
I should also mention, in terms of some of these resources, that these slides that you'll be seeing and in your book are available on CD-ROM. In essence, every one of these is a PowerPoint slide which can be brought into your computer, which you in turn can modify, change, and fit and mold to your specific needs once you learn it. This helps to make it business unit specific, application specific. And we do it, and it's called short cycle knowledge transfer. It allows a master black belt or black belt to rapidly prototype a course, be it 4 hours or be it 8 hours, and have the material present to put this course together very quickly and disseminate it.
Yeah. Plus you can use your own examples as well.
And you can put in your own examples, spreadsheets, things that you've done in the past to augment that. In this manner, you can come up with a very professional-looking delivery vehicle of the Six Sigma knowledge in the context of the breakthrough strategy very, very rapidly.
Yeah, as it relates to the specific examples that you're working with.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Molding it to specific teams and so on of people. Also, we'll be looking at a program This particular program, I'm going to restart it here so that you can clearly see it on the screen, is called Minitab. And Minitab is the standard resident software for Six Sigma statistics.
So do you need a computer then, right?
You've got to have a computer.
Can't do this by hand, huh?
These things anymore these days, Greg, of course we know.
I know.
That you got to have
I've had some businesses want to do it without it, so.
But what we'll find is that Minitab is a very, very good, solid statistical software program that the Academy, we have selected to endorse and is now being actively used in Allied Signal and General Electric as the standard. In the course of time, we've created a strategic partnership, as you know, Greg, with Minitab, and we've programmed in directly a lot of the Six Sigma statistics that's available to the clients of the Academy.
Yeah, they've been very, very receptive to all the changes and so forth.
Yes, and we'll be looking at a lot of those Minitab tools as we move forward. So that, in a nutshell, is the 50,000-foot perspective
of the video.
Of what is Six Sigma, being 3.4 defects per million opportunities, why we're doing Six Sigma, to achieve world-class quality, because simply stated, the lowest cost producer is the highest quality producer. Very simply stated. If you can produce a product with near zero defects, on time, at the lowest possible cost, you capture market share.
Absolutely.
These very, very fine corporations like Allied Signal and General Electric are proving that daily. And with that, Greg, I want to thank you very much for this introduction to the Six Sigma series and how to use these materials. And more of this will come out as we move forward.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Hello, welcome back to the Six Sigma videotape series, starting with Chapter 1 here, which is an introduction. Basically, overviewing this chapter and what it's about is just to simply restate some of the fundamental precepts and principles and beliefs of Six Sigma. And really, to better understand it, we're just going to cut right to the core of things. And to do that, we're going to start with the idea that behavior is a function of our values. And Greg, I kind of state that analytically as just B is a function of V. Much like when we say Y is a function of X, behavior is a function of our values.
So there's an equation for everything.
There's an equation for everything in this world. Isn't that the truth? So when we really look at the idea of a behavior, we find it's the way that people respond, and that values are things that characterize the way in which we respond. So basically, well, the easiest way to do this, Greg, is to illustrate.
Sounds good.
You see, our behavior is a function of what we value, right? You value this, don't you?
That makes sense.
So you see, you really want that pretty bad. This is the producer's $5 bill, by the way, not
which
his.
He won't
but he'll
be
take
back.
it anyway in this. If we continue with that thought and we look at the values around an organization, for example, here are the stated values of Allied Signal from their Total Quality Leadership, A Path to Excellence. Again, Allied Signal being an outstanding corporation and has very defined values, much like GE, Motorola, and so on. In this case, we have the values of teamwork, customers, speed, integrity, etc. But there's a fundamental second idea. And that, Greg, I'm going to give to you
cockpit
by asking you, what do these things have in common? We've got an airplane, a map, an instrument gauge, a flight log. What do you call these things? I don't know what pilots call these things.
That's replaced by the computer now.
Oh, I see. That's, that's like the slide rule
Right.
days? Okay, okay. But basically, what do these things have in common?
Yeah, measurements, it looks like.
Yeah, measurements.
Yeah. Getting somewhere.
Fundamentally, all of these things require measurement. Can you imagine getting on an airplane and the pilot not having these numbers present?
I can imagine that last night from LaGuardia. But
Oh, you could? Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
yeah, I wonder.
But no, of course. We would not risk traveling on a flight, on an airplane, that did not have such measurements and data and numbers present. And simply stated, measurements get attention. It's that simple. We value what we measure, Greg. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Can you think of some of the values around your house? What do you value around home?
My family life and my family time with them. Time.
Time.
Right.
So you measure time. You
Absolutely.
keep track of time and so on. Well, it was simply stated in 1891, I believe it was. Don't quote me on that date, Chris, but I think it's pretty accurate.
Okay.
A gentleman by the name of Lord Kelvin made a simple statement. Lord Kelvin said, if we cannot express what we know in the form of measurements, our knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. And being an old cowboy from Phoenix, Arizona, I kind of like to simplify that and translate it by saying, if we can't express what we know in the form of numbers, we really don't know much about it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Like the airplane gauges. Or how about this? Quality of our products and deliverables. If we cannot quantitatively express the quality of our products in the form of numbers, we really don't know what the quality of those products are.
Yeah, I agree. I feel, a lot of people say, I feel, I know, I think.
I think,
I believe.
That's another big one, isn't it?
Right.
That's a big difference from being able to say, well, we've got a graph here that shows what our historical quality and defect levels are, and so on. So, as we go back to a simple train of logic here, reason with me. Can we agree on something, Greg?
I think so, maybe.
We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
That's simply that stated.
Right.
And if we can't express what we do know in the form of numbers, we really don't know much about it.
Yeah. And how do you improve it if you don't even know?
That's right. And if you don't know much about it, you can't control it.
So if you can't measure it, you can't control it either.
That's right. If you can't measure it, you can't control it. You cannot improve what you don't measure.
So you can't analyze it either.
You can't analyze it.
You can't improve it, you can't control it.
If you can't measure it, you can't analyze it. You therefore cannot improve it,
And by the
nor
way,
can you control it.
Makes
We
sense.
look at measure, analyze, improve, and control. That's right. Measurements are vitally dependent. Or in short, measurement boils down to data. If we can't express what we know in the form of data, we really don't know much about it.
So it's not a matter of me trusting you.
That's right.
It's not that I don't trust you. Where's your data?
That's right. Where's my data? Where's my data? Matter of fact, if you look at a 10 Deutschmark bill, you will find the normal distribution on the 10 Deutschmark bill.
Is that right?
That's a fact. What do we have in our currency? Oh, in God we trust. That we do trust in. All others bring data. So when we start to look at a corporation or a business unit of some form, what becomes important to measure? If we zoom in on these things and look deeper at them, what we can find is process levels of quality in parts per million defective, lot reject rates, total reject rate or total defect rates,
Right.
the cost of poor quality.
What's meant by that? I mean, cost of poor quality. There's
Well,
so many definitions.
There's a lot of definitions of that, Greg, and we're going to get in later chapters into more specifics about the cost of quality, but in essence, reverse it. What's the cost of good quality?
Yeah.
Good quality should be a minimum cost. So the cost of poor quality is when quality isn't good, it's that waste in terms of money,
Right.
material, labor, warranty, those sorts of things that we lay money out for that we shouldn't have to.
So that rework and the cycle time of additional things that are occurring around you and that sort of stuff.
That's right.
Waste.
And if we look at the three key determinants of customer satisfaction, which is a quality product delivered on time at the lowest possible price, then we should measure those three things: quality, time,
That makes sense.
and cost. Takes all of them to satisfy the customer, not just one.
Yeah.
So as we have critical to quality characteristics, we would have critical to timing characteristics, critical to cost characteristics. All of those things form CTS, or critical to satisfaction issues that we'll be looking at.
Makes sense.
So,
How do I apply this? How do I apply this measurement thing? I mean, what's an example?
okay, a good example of that, and I'm going to be a little philosophical here for
Go
a
ahead.
minute. Fundamentally, if we say that answers are a function of questions, would you not agree with that?
Yeah.
Or would we turn that around and say questions are a function of answers? No. Maybe. It's kind of circular. But nonetheless, questions lead and answers follow. Now, here's an interesting thought for you. Listen carefully. The same question invariably produces the same result. To change the result means to change the question. Now, how do we go about creating new questions?
That's a good question.
Data, measurement.
Right.
We don't question what we don't measure. For example, if we measure final yield at the end of a factory, we know the number of units successfully produced over the total number of units. We could say that our factory yield is 96%. But we could also ask the question, what's your total defects per unit produced during manufacture?
Yeah, that's a good question.
If we knew that numerical answer, that would generate a series of questions heretofore not asked.
Yeah.
Now, as these new questions arise, vision emerges from that. Direction becomes more apparent. Ambiguity diminishes. You know, I once heard said, Greg, it was asked of me, for years I wondered, what's the difference between a manager and an executive?
Good question.
Well, I heard it expressed this way. An executive has the ability to work in the light of ambiguity, to create vision and to set direction.
From no data? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that becomes the style of an executive. The executive who pursues the course of measurement of critical things to the business and derives new questions is constantly putting that business on new frontiers. And those new frontiers is what leads to breakthrough growth and prosperity for the company, as well as for the benefit of the corporation. And finally, as this ambiguity diminishes, people become mobilized toward a common direction, and that's leadership. Leadership is the ability to define the measurements in an organization which will create a new vision, a new standard, Six Sigma, rate of growth, and then mobilize those people toward a common deployment aimed at achieving that fundamental goal. And as we come closer to achieving that goal, we become the lower cost producer.
Going back to what you just said earlier.
That's exactly right.
Big circle.
And as we become the lowest cost producer, we become more competitive. As we become more competitive, we produce better products, lower cost, on time, greater warranties, and the whole thing mushrooms to one of prosperity for us as constituents of a corporation, to the very essence of that company, which is its stockholders, to add stockholder value. That's the fundamental reason we're in business, right?
So that means that we need to absolutely know our CTQs.
Got to know our CTQs.
And be close to that customer.
That's right. Very close. And we're going to talk more about that later. To help us understand better even yet how we make this journey, we're going to create an agenda that we're going to follow overlaid on this videotape series. And specifically where we start, Greg, is this is the agenda from the training of the Master Black Belts in Crotonville.
Okay.
When we did that for General
Right.
Electric. And it was so well received, this agenda, we decided to mold this videotape series around it. And where we're going to start is a Six Sigma overview. We've now had our introduction to it. We've overviewed how to look at the tapes. And now what we're going to do is start to actually overview what Six Sigma is and how it can be applied. Then we're going to be looking at the customer's perspective.
Okay.
How can we focus on that customer with measurements and so on to help us achieve Six Sigma? You'll also notice down here, as I present this agenda, what chapters of the book we'll be working against. In this particular instance, we'll see if we can make that even bigger. Chapters 1 and 2 is the Introduction and Six Sigma overview. The Customer Focus Imperative is chapters 3 and 10. Finally, the Vision of Six Sigma. And then we will turn our attention. I know you're going to be hard to read this on the screen here, but a key topic will be how to achieve process entitlement. See, customer satisfaction is a function of key characteristics. Those key characteristics is a function of the process that makes them. We want to be able to get what we're entitled to out of that process.
So that's the best? Is that what that is? Is that what you're saying?
That's the best that that process could ever be. We want to be able to find out, A, how capable is the process currently, and what's the best it could ever be. If there's a big differential between those two, that's an improvement opportunity waiting to happen.
I see.
To benefit the producer and the customer simultaneously.
So again, back to measurement.
Back to measurement again.
Okay.
So we'll be looking at achieving process entitlement. We'll also be looking at concepts in design for manufacturability, as well as advanced topics in Six Sigma.
Okay.
Finally, we'll start to move into the improvement phase, for which we have to understand hypothesis testing, analysis of variance, design of experiments, and ultimately into the control phase, where once we've identified those vital few process characteristics, we want to put realistic tolerances on them to control their effect over time. So as we look at those breakthrough strategy again, measure, analyze, improve, and control, we'll be looking at the tools of that in this context.
It looks like you're burying down through there and finally getting to the vital things you're going to be messing with.
That's right. We're starting now to drill into what Six Sigma is all about.
Got it.
Thank you very much, Greg.